speak to her staff. She has some public relations people who filter out people like me, but they ask me, I think. Okay. So I'll be interested in your view about this. So welcome, everybody. I think I'll turn on the gallery view now, so we'll see everybody who's officially here. Okay. Now, Adam, I will at the moment send that on to you. So if you get your mind wanders,
I won't be able to edit anything if I'm in a Zoom call at the same time. No, and I won't be able to really read it at the same time because it's difficult to follow the two things at once.
True. Okay, forget it then.
Well, I'll take a look right after the call.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, here we are. It's now 4 minutes after 2, and so I can be glad to welcome everybody. Hello, Oded. Who are you? Are you Oded, the guy with the white beard and hair?
Yes, I am a Brazilian.
Oh, all right.
From the World Social Forum and for Instituto Cidades Sustentáveis, Institute for Sustainable Cities.
Wonderful. Okay. I believe in good cities. Which city are you trying to be sustainable? Is one in Brazil or everywhere?
Yeah, in Brazil. In Brazil and somewhere in Latin America also.
Okay. Well, good. Good luck with it. That's great. Hello, Wendy McKenzie.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon.
I think you're a newcomer, right?
Yes, I'm new. I'm from a UNA in Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm the General Secretary of the United Nations Association of Trinidad and Tobago.
Wonderful. All right, good. Now I'm going to start us going live, which I haven't done yet. 5 after, it's time for us to go live, and it takes a minute for me to set that up. This is Town Hall September. Go live.
I think we'll probably have a few more people joining us quite soon.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. People, we didn't get our notices, our publicity going until a little late.
I think we'll probably have a few more people joining us quite soon.
Right. I agree. But in the meantime, we can begin a good conversation with the people who are here, no doubt, because at least three of you, at any rate, I'm sure, are new to this and probably have things to share. So I do know Stephen Salter. Professor Salter is it Cambridge where you're located?
I'm Edinburgh. I did it
Edinburgh,
in Cambridge because I'm in Edinburgh now.
Yes, it's Wadhams who's at Cambridge. Is that right? Only now he's in India or Italy or someplace. So, you know.
David King and Hugh Hunt and Sean Fitzgerald are in Cambridge.
All right, fine. Now, why don't, because you are the expert on cloud brightening, and I bet probably nobody else here, except Adam and I, have heard about cloud brightening. I wonder if you'd be so good as to give us a pitch. You know, why should we brighten the clouds and how would we do that?
Okay, how long do you want? You can start from about 5 minutes up to an hour. Shall I go for about 7 minutes?
Well, I sure. I mean, normally this works out to be more like a conversation anyway. So everybody is free to interrupt you and say, what do you mean by that? Or I don't believe a word of it or whatever.
All right. Okay. Right. Well, the first thing is that the plan of trying to get to zero carbon dioxide emissions is very stupid because it's going to take quite a while to do it. And by the time we've done it, we will have emitted a whole lot more. So that the floods and droughts and extreme hurricanes and everything are going to be quite a lot worse than they are now. And I don't think they're the present things are acceptable. So we have to, as well as doing that, which we must do, we have to find ways to remove the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. And we also want to do some direct cooling. And I'm doing the engineering for a project that was proposed by a chap called John Latham, who is exploiting a piece of physics called the Toomey effect, which is about the reflectivity of clouds. And Toomey was able to fly over clouds and measure how much sun energy was coming in from above and how much was being bounced up from below from the cloud tops. That let him measure the reflectivity of the cloud. And then he could fly into the cloud and collect samples of the drops and count how many there were in a cubic centimeter and how big they were. And the conclusion of all his work was that the reflectivity of a cloud depends on the size distribution of the drops in the cloud, with a large number of small drops reflecting more than the same amount of water as bigger drops with a smaller number. And if you heard the expression, the dark storm clouds are gathering, you'll understand. So John Latham knew about Toomey's work, and he worked out how much water you'd need to spray of the right size in order to do enough reflection from the clouds in order to cancel the extra energy that we've been getting from too much CO2. And he was amazed at how little it was. And I'd been working on another idea to make the sea evaporate quicker. And he asked me, he heard about what I was doing, and he asked me if I could make the spray for his project. And I said, yes, no problem at all. That was not totally accurate. But the way we want to do it is to have ships sailing the oceans, and we've got to find the right bits of ocean to do it in, and that will certainly vary through the year. And they have to be powered, and we want to do that from the wind. And they have to filter seawater to get rid of all the plankton. And we then pump the filtered seawater through a thing a bit like the shower head that you have in your shower, except that it'll have 200 million nozzles in 30 different silicon wafers. So that's an awful lot of nozzles. And we want to be pumping 10 to the 17 drops a second from each of quite a large number of ships. And these will come out into the atmosphere. They'll cool the air, so they'll initially fall down. They'll spread down to the level of the ocean. They'll can't fall into it because they're glued into the air around them with very high viscosity, if you were of that size, much, much higher than gravity. And they will then, that bit of air will get warmed up by being in contact with the sea, and they'll spread through the boundary layer of the atmosphere, which varies from sort of 100 to 2,000 meters. And they'll be spread fairly evenly through this. And the ones that get to the right humidity will produce new and smaller cloud drops. And the size of the drop that you want to choose is quite difficult to work out. It depends on work done by a chap called Kohler. And he worked out how big a drop had to be for a given relative humidity excess to get nucleation.
Stephen, can I ask, where's the place you're planning to spray these things? It doesn't matter where you do it.
Initially, the place it'll be most urgent to do it is to save the Arctic ice. Mm-hmm. And for about 2 months in the year, there's actually more solar energy going into the Arctic than in the equator because it's coming in over 24 hours. So the first place we'll do it is up in past Norway and also the Bering Strait, mm-hmm. Where we'll be cruising the oceans, not getting dangerously close to the ice, but skirting around it. We want really to be in places where the wind and the currents are moving north. So they take a lot of heat with them. And we'll be there for late May, June, and early July, perhaps. So just for a short time. We wouldn't need very many boats to do this because of the extra sun coming in at that time of year.
how many votes do you think you'd need, and when could you get this thing going? How long would it take to?
Right. Well, we'd need, if all of them are working all the time, we'd need about 40 ships to do that, the Arctic. Now, we can't be sure that they're working all the time, so you probably won't have a fleet of 100 to do it. But we're only using them for 2 months, so for the rest of the year, they can be moderating hurricanes, and or maybe stopping sea level rise.
So how quickly, how much effect could you have? If you had 40, could you do enough to actually keep the ice from melting at all in the Arctic?
Yes, you could.
That season right away? Or you have to wait to get the effect of this thing?
Well, you'd have it that summer. We know the rate of ice loss, and that's about 25,000 tons a second. All right. We know the density of ice, and we know the latent heat of ice. So that tells us how much energy is going into ice melting. And we then know how much of the solar energy we need to reflect. And it's actually about 100 times more than the United States electricity generation. So it's quite a lot of energy. But the reason that it works is that the energy you need to make one of the tiny little drops that's just big enough to nucleate is very small compared with the energy that's going to be reflected by the cloud drop that grows on it. I mean, it's many tens of millions. So we've got this incredible energy gain from how to make a drop to how to make a tiny seed to make to what the cloud drop is going to reflect.
You know, when people worry about it, and I know that you say the word geoengineering is going to come to, it's going to be uttered right away. Somebody's going to say the word, and everybody's going to go into a panic and say that we don't know what the effects will be. Well, what would you guess any negative effects might be? What is it we have to watch out for in this?
Well, we do know that it affects precipitation, and it can affect precipitation a long way away from where you do it. But the effect seems to be to increase precipitation in dry places like the Sahara and Australia and Mexico and South Africa, and we could increase the precipitation there by 10%. And there are places where the precipitation is reduced, but they nearly are all over the sea. And there's not many people who live over the sea or need rainfall from it. So really, we wouldn't mind too much if we did have less rainfall at sea. Otherwise, it's a rather small effect in the sort of middling places. We could do it in about, if we had the right amount of money, we could probably have the first one ready to go in about 5 years. And if we wanted to have a lot of them built, they are designed to be built in lots of different places with all the parts coming together. So you'd make a large number of them if you needed to in a hurry. I hope you won't need to do it in a hurry, but it'd be nice to know that you could.
Well, how worried would you be about any potential side effects, the one that you've mentioned, and any other that may be unforeseeable? How scared should a person be? Because it sounds to me like we can't be in much worse, to put it bluntly, we couldn't be in much worse shape than we're in right now. The world is going to hell in a handbag. But maybe we could be in worse shape. And what do you think?
Okay, well, the first thing is that the stuff the aerosol we make is so small that it doesn't fall out, but it is washed out by rainfall or drizzle, so that whatever we do, we decide, oh dear, that was a mistake, we didn't want to do it. For example, supposing there was another volcanic eruption like Pinatubo, which cooled the earth for a year or so. Supposing we decided we didn't want it, we just stop. We can send an email out to all the spray vessels, and they would stop spraying. And in a few days, it's really actually half the mean time between rain showers, all the effects would be wiped out, and we'd be back to where we would have been otherwise. So it's a very high frequency response. Okay. We do have to keep doing it all the time.
You could make
like breathing,
You could make the corrections quickly enough so that you could almost cancel out the bad effects you were having right away.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I'll buy that. Anybody else buy that? Or if you have any qualms, why don't we give the floor to anybody who wants to.
The word geoengineering is down there with sort of molesting children at the moment in the popularity stakes. And I would like to try and correct that if we can do it.
Okay. So who wants to tackle Professor Salter? Yeah, Aby Weisfeld.
Hi. There's a fortuitous circumstance that I would like to make reference to in terms of climate warming, and that is the sunspot cycles, which have two cycles, one short, 11 years, and the other is 250 years. Yep. And fortuitous circumstance is that we are actually at the nadir of the 250-year cycle, so the Earth is actually less warm than it would be otherwise. Mm-hmm. So the human effects of climate warming would be even more disastrous if it wasn't for this, what I would call a fortuitous circumstance. Yeah,
it's maybe means that my estimate of a few hundred ought to be instead of 500, maybe we want to be 700. But whatever it is, we don't know how to control the sunspots. We can respond to them. The high frequency response is very nice. It's like steering a road vehicle. You can go to the left or the right. There is quite a lot of evidence from cosmic rays affecting clouds in exactly the same way as we're trying to do it. The cosmic rays are coming in from the space and from the sun at varying rates. They induce a change in the isotopes of, I think, beryllium. And so we've got a long history record of all the cosmic ray incoming flux. And when we look at that and we plot it against the world's temperatures and the CO2 concentrations, which we can also get from ice cores, the fit's very good. It works just the same way as what we're trying to do, except that we have a bit more control over it. But you're right about the sunspots, yes.
Yeah. Another concern. Another thought of mine is that while there's a great deal of concern and talk about the carbonization of oxygen, the burning of carbon, creating this heat, another effect of this carbonization is that for every carbon atom that is burned, there's 2 oxygen atoms that are taken out of our atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So, burning stuff, actually decreases the amount of oxygen we have to breathe on a long-term basis.
Yeah, it's a very long term, though. The plants, of course, turn it around the other way and give the oxygen back. And there's a lot of plants in phytoplankton in the sea, which we could encourage to grow more of, and they would convert more CO2 back to oxygen. And they need to do that by, one way might be to give them a bit more iron. They're very short of iron, and you get more phytoplankton if you could put a bit of iron in. You don't need very much.
Well, that sounds good. That sounds necessary, because otherwise vegetation is being destroyed by humans.
Yes, trees don't do it. Don't do a useful job until about 30 years old, but the phytoplankton do it in a few days.
Okay, I think we need to suggest that this is a wonderful topic for further conversation. And the way to prolong this conversation is for everybody who's concerned to go to the comments column for this particular show. And this show, I don't know the number, it will be titled The World in September 2021. That'll be the title of the show. So if you go to our website, to savetheworld.ca, and in the search bar in a few days, not tonight, because I have to edit it and it'll take me a while, but in a few days, put in the world in September 2021, and it will take you to our page with the recording of this talk show. And you can there find, if you scroll down, you'll find a comments column. So feel free, and I, in fact, urge you all to post any and debate anything that you want there, especially anything that we've talked about in this show. And I imagine that this is a very good place to continue whatever dialogue AB and Professor Salter have initiated. So feel free to do that. But I want to move on now because we've got a whole raft of new people. Stephen Salter just came back in, so I guess he got.
Let's see, I see a chat column, but not a comments column. Do you mean the chat?
No, not on this window at all. You have to go to our website, which is called tosavetheworld.ca. And actually, Adam, you put that in the chat for them to see, so they'll know, if you will, please, Adam. But our website is where this will be posted. You can watch the show there, and you can have a conversation about it there. Okay. Welcome back, Stephen Salter. I guess you got
what went wrong there? I dropped off for a bit, but came back.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm hoping that you and AB and others will have continue the conversation on our website on the comments column. And we have a whole bunch of other people here. We have some newcomers, and I want to recognize some of the people whose names I don't think I've seen before. Wendy McKenzie is did you say Trinidad or where, Wendy? You have to unmute yourself to speak. And please show your face, if you will. She's with the UN Association or something. If you'll open up your window, Wendy. No, all right. If you won't, I will go on to somebody else. Who else was here? A man named, where'd he go? Some of our people have already come and gone. Oded was a guy named here.
Steve, we have Valerie Mundwa, who I think is from South Africa, that's just joined.
Right. Okay, Valerie, if you can unmute yourself and speak up, we would love to see your face. Valerie Mundwa. No? Everybody likes to hide.
Hi, everybody. You know, I've spoken to you before from Cape Town last time.
Okay, we want to see you. Put your
I won't be able
camera on.
I won't be able, I'm in the dark. I went outside because I'm in some meeting inside. So now I'm outside in the very dark. You won't be able to see me. I'll try later when there's light to be on. But yeah, I know most of you. I've been here and quite a few times. And thank you so much for this initiative.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. So let me see. Pauline Rosenau, I think you're in Florida, aren't you? Speak up and unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I'm in Florida today. And I go between Florida and Houston, which is ridiculous because you don't get any weather advantage. And that's my life at the moment for a whole lot of personal reasons. Mm-hmm. Love these talks, and I love meeting with listening to all these intellectual discussions. And people think that when you retire, I guess you're supposed to put your mind in retirement mode, but mine's still active, and I enjoy every moment of these discussions. And I was lucky enough to have an interdisciplinary undergraduate education, which means I can understand a little of this, even though it's been a long time.
Isn't that wonderful? Yes. Well, not only that, but we have a long-standing friendship, a very long-standing friendship, because we were in graduate school at the same time in Berkeley. And you actually lived at the other end of my building in University Village. So we've known each other a very long time, but didn't stay in touch the whole time. You are a retired professor of political science and health studies, I believe, at the University of Texas in Houston. And you did a talk show with me the other day about comparing various kinds of healthcare systems. Can you maybe give a few of the highlights of our conversation? I wouldn't presume to summarize it, but you can if you want.
My goal was to point out what are some of the advantages. We have a lot of data from many countries. And if we look at the ones that are most similar to those that are relevant for those of us who live in North America, we see very quickly that wasting a lot of money on administrative costs is, the biggest loss for citizens in all of these countries, because every dollar that goes to paper pushing, which is what I call administration, is one less dollar that we can pay for medical care. The country I live in, the United States, half the people get too much medical care and the other half don't get enough. Hey,
now, how could you have too much medical care? I know the answer, but I don't think anybody else will guess.
Well, the answer to that is if you're at risk because you have excellent insurance that pays everything, you need to get a second opinion before you let anybody come at you with a knife.
Okay.
Because if you really need it, it can save your life and give you quality of life for many years to come. And if you don't need it, it can be a disastrous mistake for everybody. So get a second opinion, maybe a third opinion. And that's my solution to one of the biggest problems of the healthcare system in the United States today. And that is the maldistribution of the resources we have to spend on healthcare.
Would you say that happens in other rich countries? For example, Scandinavian countries and France and so on have very generous healthcare coverage. I think every citizen has all the healthcare they need. But does that mean that in those countries there are also too many surgeons with quick on the trigger knives?
Well, I think a lot of other countries have ways of controlling it. For example, there are waiting lists in Quebec, but those waiting lists are subject to modification by a committee at the hospital that the doctors are part of. And they can say, look, Meta really needs this surgery, or she needs to be in the hospital so we can monitor while she's on this medication for a week. And that puts her ahead of somebody who, it's a discretionary procedure. It could wait for 6 months and it won't make that much difference. So I like to see those kinds of decisions made by the people who have the knowledge to really make a difference.
As a physician, maybe I could counteract a little bit of that from here in Canada, where we have that system. And actually, surgery is hard work. All of the surgeons are behind times. They have more than they can do. And the problem is operations not being done that should be. The number of operations that are done because of the doctor wanting to make dollars is zero in Canada and almost zero in the United States. That is really not a problem. The problem is surgery that needs to be done that isn't. Really.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
This is about a problem that arose very soon after X-rays became available, and people noticed that the organs of people who were ill were lower than they ought to be, and they did operations to lift up, your kidneys and your liver and so on, and this was painful and expensive, and it didn't work very well until they realized that what they thought was the right position was what they'd learned from doing anatomy on bodies that were lying horizontally. And with the early X-ray machines, people were standing vertically. This was I'm glad that somebody's laughing at it. This was called ptosis. Okay, until they tried it was a sort of expensive and fashionable operation to have your organs lifted up a bit.
That's a good example.
There's another thing I can add to this. My brother is a medic and he's retired now, but he was doing a locum job, taking over from somewhere else who had to do maternity leave, and he managed to do all his workload. And he looked at her list of patients, and he systematically cleared them off too. So when she came back from maternity leave, she didn't have any waiting list. And I would have thought that she would be very pleased about this, having this responsibility removed from her. But she was very, very cross. And my brother concluded that some doctors, I hope not too many, want to have a long waiting list because it gives them job security.
Well, that's ridiculous. Both of your stories are ridiculous. This business of organ lifting surgery for that purpose, I've never heard of it being done. That's
It was a long time ago.
both of those stories are ridiculous.
Well, they're both true as well.
Was this, the 19th century or early 20th century pre-World War One that it was a thing?
Yes, which when X-rays were first coming, a lot of X-rays used in World War One, so it would be about then, yeah.
But there's also a lot of research that's been published. For example, a great study where they took half of the files of people who needed a certain procedure from Canada and half from the United States. They blinded the name of the country and the person, and they got a committee of half Canadians and half Americans to look at those files and say, is this an appropriate procedure? Well, as it turns out, Canada was doing about 15% too little, and the United States was doing about 40% too many of this particular procedure. So
that's a good comparison because of the system in the States. That's a good comparison.
Yeah, it's a good study, right. And we need more like that.
Well, yeah, but 40% too much is not exactly a good statistic. I don't want to be the one who's a 40 percentile too much.
I know, I agree with you, man. We should have if we had a proper and fair distribution, it would be better, because a lot of people who need healthcare in the United States don't have good insurance, or they don't have any insurance, and they do get care, but it's always later. And sometimes that makes it harder, because had they been treated earlier, it could have been a better outcome.
Okay, Robert, you can fight them both if you will.
US, right? Robert, you're speaking about the US, correct?
No, I'm from Canada.
Okay, you're from Canada. All right.
Also, Pauline has lived in Canada. She actually knows the Canadian situation quite well. And in fact, you've also studied nursing homes, and I think you might want to bring people up to date about what you think about the quality of nursing homes in various countries, because you were on a big study of that, weren't you?
Right, but we better let somebody else participate, because if I get started on that, we're going to take the next hour and a half. So I'll let
you can have 5 minutes. Go for it.
Okay. On nursing homes, 5 minutes. Well, Canada didn't do too bad, but Sweden and Germany did better. And the United States is a poor trailer in the list of quality of nursing homes. At least that's what we found. And we did 1 week, 40, 50 hours just observing. And there was a group of 40 of us. We were financed by the Canada Council, and we traveled to these 6 countries. And we just looked at nursing home care, which is pretty good. But as of COVID, the Swedes, who did great when we studied them 7, 8 years ago, did very poorly on protecting their nursing home populations from COVID. They were late, or they didn't realize how serious this disease was, but they have had political governmental leaders on TV making for the poor performance.
Okay.
Swedes on this issue.
All right. Well, thank you. Anybody else have a question about any of Pauline's expertise?
Which were the better countries and which were the worst?
Well, we only studied 6, so it's a very short list, but we studied them intensively. And we studied 5 of the Canadian provinces. I have to look at the results, because the Canadian provinces were close. Some were better than others on nursing homes. But what the most important thing we found was the Scandinavian countries. If you had to be in a nursing home, everybody in our study, all 40 of us, would have said, I think I'm going to go and live in Sweden. Of course, you can't do that at the last minute, because you haven't paid taxes there, and you have to be admitted, and you have to have all kinds of requirements to get nursing home care in the Scandinavian countries.
Yes, Sweden with its high taxes and Norway with its oil money both have very high standards because they put the most money into them. Yes.
Right. But having money doesn't guarantee good nursing home care.
Oh, no.
We observed many, many wealthy people who had bed sores and no one to look after them, no one to check to see that everything was going well, no one to just pop in at unexpected times and see if they were really getting their meals, and if they were able to eat them, or if they needed help with somebody feeding them, if there was staff members to do that, or if they had to hire somebody from outside just to come in and feed meals. It's a very sad situation with respect to nursing homes. In every country, there's problems.
In Canada, it's been a huge political issue, including in our recent election. And the solution that the experts are landing on is primarily to do with enough staff, appropriate staff, well-paid staff, and staff in a good mental condition, and all vaccinated at this point.
And training. They don't get much training under current law.
That's right, training. Appropriate staff with the right training. And
we agree. Okay, we solved the problem. Next problem.
Good pay.
Now there's a system here for putting your hand up. Of course, you can wave at me if you think you can catch my eye, but otherwise, if you put your hand up mechanically, I only see 2 hands at the moment, and you may have just not removed them after speaking. Aby, do you have something you want to say further? Aby Weisfeld.
Unmute.
Yeah, unmute, Adi.
Oh, yes, I've unmuted myself. I wanted to bring up another topic under the medical genre, and that is the looping effect that is possible in this pandemic, whereby new varieties of the coronavirus come in to effect that are more powerful than the vaccines that are being propagated. So this is a problem which I think will become more serious with time, and will extend the pandemic into years rather than months. But I think that there is an alternative treatment that is available for the purposes of immunization rather than vaccination. Although the vaccine is the only alternative at the present time and is useful, it is not a solution in and of itself. And so I'm trying to advocate immunization by means of convalescent plasma, which can also be duplicated in the laboratory to be monoclonal antibody injections, which have been used to some extent in some places, but it seems to me, should be used as the mass immunization campaign to deal with the new varieties, and one which doesn't include, handing over billions of dollars to the pharmaceutical companies.
Well, now, if there's anybody here who feels you really have some expertise on this, let's give the floor to that person. I don't know. I mean, just because you're an MD doesn't mean you necessarily know a whole lot about plasma.
I do know about that.
Yeah, all right, good.
Vaccinations are overwhelmingly the answer, even with the variants. What he's saying is some misinformation. Those treatments or creation of immunization in that way is very insufficient. The vaccinations are powerful, including the variants, although not quite as effective against the variants. We've got to get over 90% vaccination. That's absolutely the answer. Way ahead of these other things.
Yes, I agree with you there. But I also agree that it is less effective against, let's say, the Delta variant, which after two vaccinations. No? Oh, I heard that it was 64%.
Absolutely wrong. That's misinformation. It's absolutely wrong.
Okay, that's good to hear.
There is a compound called ivermectin, which has been proven to be effective against COVID-19 in Argentina, in Mexico, and in India.
No, Betty Jane, you're really misinforming people now. Baloney.
No, I'm not.
I'm quite sure that this is really not a good idea, and I think we.
It is a good idea, Meta. You're wrong. You're wrong. You do not know what the statistics are. The statistics show that ivermectin was correct in Mexico, in India, and in Argentina. It's an inexpensive drug that's been around over 40 years. It's an anti-parasitic. It's also an antiviral.
Oh.
There are a lot of people in hospitals or who have died because they took horse worming pills.
Where did you get that information from? And what is your source of information, Meta?
Well, Betty Jane, I would have to say your interventions very frequently are misleading, and I really don't think that you really know enough to
Do you know what the
this.
purine
I
gene
would
is?
suggest
Meta,
that
do you know what the
Robert
purine gene
Reed
is on
or
the S2 part of the
Charles
spike protein?
Tauber or Pauline Vaillancourt, Rosenauer are much more able to comment on this than I would, and so I would give the floor to them.
I have a proposal, Betty Jane. If you would go onto that link and post your sources, then we can look at what you have and decide for ourselves.
Sorry, I'm on an Android and I cannot do that. I do not have a laptop computer. I am on an Android and I have limited abilities to communicate on the Android, apart from speaking what I know.
Okay, well, my bottom line is, Betty Jane, if you have the information and if it's valid, I'd be happy to look at it. I will judge it on its merits. I'm evidence-based. That's my key variable in terms of judging. I'd like to see what you have and I will look at it. Otherwise, well, I can just say, I'm glad to have your opinion, but I'd like to hear what other people say too.
Betty Jane, use the comments on the website. Use the comments on the website for that information, please, Betty Jane. But I think that you are misinformed on chloroquine.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about chloroquine. I'm talking about ivermectin, ivermectin, which is.
I don't want to have any more misinformation spread on this show. So onwards, beyond Betty Jane. I'm sorry, Betty Jane, but you don't have the floor anymore. Charles Tauber.
No, well, I don't believe you.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. Just want to bring people up to date a little bit about what we're doing. We've got a couple of new groups. We've got 2 groups of Uyghurs now that we're working with on psychological issues.
No, you need to explain to these people who you are, Charles, because they don't.
Sorry.
Some of them know your background, but not everybody.
Okay.
Charles is in Vukovar, Croatia, and he's a psychotherapist working with people who are traumatized by war.
Yeah, and I've been working with such people since 1988, and I've been in the Western Balkans since 1995, and we work online with various parts of the world. We teach people who don't know, who are quote unquote amateurs, to work with trauma. What we do is we create what are called barefoot therapists. And the idea there is to increase capacity in places where psychological knowledge and expertise simply does not exist. We do it by a Rogerian method. In other words, we use the experience of the participants to the greatest degree possible, and we supplement that. I'm going bleeding out of my head at the moment because we're having at least 2 groups, 3 groups a day at this point. So, and additional clients. So we're going quite crazy with it, but it's fun. That's the nice part. I just despise bureaucrats, and we're fighting with them constantly, but that's another side, especially here in Croatia. By the way, this year is 30 years since the war in Vukovar started. We're expecting lots of military. We had some last weekend in town. And please beware of the 18th of November. It's going to be a mess here. Absolute mess, because that was the day that Vukovar came into Serb hands.
Sorry?
That's the day that Vukovar came into Serb hands in 1991. And it's going to be a right-wing circus. Absolute circus. What I'd like to bring people up on is also the Afghanistan situation. We haven't got groups of Afghanis yet.
Is something that Daniel might get into. I'm sure the advice that he would give would be outstanding, because he has an absolutely.
You need to turn off your microphone and mute yourself unless you are called on. Charles Tauber has the floor now, so please mute your microphone if you're not Charles Tauber.
Thanks. We are working with 2 groups of Uyghurs. We're doing a lot of work in Nigeria. We're getting a couple of groups in Congo. We're working with 1 group in Guatemala. And we're trying, don't ask me how we're going to do it, to continue to write the self-paced online courses. So we're going pretty much out of our heads. But that's the nice part of it.
Tell me about this right-wing movement that you see coming. I don't understand. It fell into Serbian hands when, and I don't know the.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'll talk about the history. Croatia was a puppet state of the Nazis during the Second World War. It was called the NDH, the National Democratic Alliance of Croatia. That sentiment has remained. This was the so-called Ustasha at the time. It has remained, unfortunately. It was quite powerful during the 1991 to 1995 war. It still is here.
I'm sorry, you're saying a significant number of people in Croatia are secretly sort of pro-Nazi?
Not so secretly. It's pretty open.
Are you still seeing war crime tribunals and prosecutions from the war back in the 80s and 90s in the Western Balkans, or is that largely finished up?
It's largely finished off. The ICTY, the Intergovernmental Council on the former Yugoslavia, has stopped. It stopped a couple of years ago. There are some prosecutions in Serbia and Bosnia and Croatia of war criminals. And they are very political. The results of those, unfortunately, are very political. I wish they weren't. Everybody here basically is both a perpetrator and a victim. That's the way you can look at all of the groups here.
Ouch, that's terrible.
It is terrible. And for example, even in Vukovar and in places in Bosnia, in the schools are still segregated by ethnicity. Classes occur at different times of the day, in different rooms sometimes, in different buildings sometimes, but it still happens. Even restaurants here in town are still segregated. So I can go to pretty much any restaurant I like, which is nice, but it is that way. And you still.
But what happens if the wrong person goes to the wrong restaurant? They don't get served, or
they'll get served, but they will not get to. It will not be very friendly. It will not. Let me put it that way. There's also, to a certain degree, discrimination in medical care. All the rest of it. It's still happening, particularly in Bosnia.
Somebody's making some weird noise. If you have your microphone on and are scratching something, don't scratch, or else turn off your microphone, preferably both. Onward, Charles.
No, this is, so the Western Balkans are still a mess. And to top it all off, we've got the whole migrant thing. And there's a great deal of violence at the Croatian border because it's the EU border, the European Union border. And it's extremely violent. So from Serbia into Croatia and from Bosnia into Croatia. In fact, it's been brought up a number of times with the ombudsman, with the European ombudsman on human rights.
Let me get clear. It's on the border of the EU because you're at the border between Serbia and Croatia, right?
Right. Croatia is EU.
In the EU, and Serbia is not.
And right, and Bosnia is not. So what is called Frontex, which is the European border police, is basically keeping migrants out. By the way, today is World Migrant and Refugee Day. I don't know if people were aware of that. I put something on our Facebook page. And virtual.
Excuse me, Charles, I can interject and say that the new issue, the October issue of Peace Magazine, will be out within a few days. It hasn't gone to press yet, but it will tomorrow. And the feature article is an interview I did with Lloyd Axworthy, who is now the head of the World Refugee and Migration Council. And so we have a very long conversation, the transcript of it, pretty edited a little bit, but it'll be available. And you can buy it on your newsstand, or if you want to join and buy it as a digital version, you can go to Press Reader and subscribe there for the same price as you would a paper subscription, and get it anywhere in the world. Doesn't make sense to subscribe to the paper version if you live in another country, because it takes too long and it's too expensive to mail it. Okay, sorry, Charles, I'm interrupting a very interesting comment by you.
Yeah, and I'll have to go in a minute because I've got a group in Nigeria tonight still. The point is that there is and one thing. I've been working with Joseph Kampaye in Burundi, and we finished our first group. Finished is a big word, not really, but okay. And we're going to have some more groups in Burundi. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to do a lot of work. And if anybody is interested, please have a look at our website and please do contact me.
Tell them what's the website name.
I will put it on the chat. I will put my email on the chat as well.
Okay, but say it too, because the chat is not visible on the.
Okay, it's
video.
It's www.cwwpp.org.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, appreciate that. And onward, it's good of you to do the wonderful work you're doing, Charles. And maybe other people want to become barefoot therapists too.
Please have a look at the website, and please, there's a contact page on the website, and please do not hesitate. We love to hear from people. And by the way, our annual report for 2020 will be coming out within the next week or two. It's almost funny, but that's how busy we are.
All right, terrific. I only see one hand, and that is Adams. I don't know whether you still.
I must go, unfortunately.
Okay, bye-bye, Charles. Thanks for showing.
Take care.
Well, I had a question for Pauline back when she was talking about elder care. I don't know if you want me to ask it now or if we've jumped off that topic.
I don't care. Whatever.
Pauline, have you noticed with your studies a difference in the mortality rates? Because there are cultural differences when it comes to elder care for seniors who are put into nursing homes and assisted living facilities versus those that stay at home. Some of those have more clinical settings when it comes to infection control, whereas the home settings do not. But the home settings might have less cross exposure or less risk of exposure because it's a smaller population. Have you noticed a difference in mortality rates between those two settings? Oh, you're muted, by the way.
Pauline?
I haven't studied it, but
I can answer that.
Okay, we got an answer from Robert.
Yes, there are epidemics that have occurred in the nursing homes of COVID, and those epidemics do not occur in people in home care. So the answer is there have been these epidemics of 40 or 50 or 80 deaths in one nursing home because it got in there and spread so rapidly before they could do anything about it.
I think you have to make a difference in terms of the time frame. At the beginning, when Sweden had the terrible death rate in nursing homes, the way that COVID was spreading was not understood. And they thought by wiping down the surfaces that they would in some way reduce the spread. But we now know that COVID-19 is spread as an aerosol. And so it's the people, it's the breathing and the masks that are much more important than the surfaces. And so that means that people living in homes in Sweden, which is often preferred, there's less likely, even if there is a case of COVID, that it would spread to many people. So the private homes that are taking care of individuals in Sweden didn't do that bad. And certainly they did poorly if someone in the family did have COVID. But because they were separated in these homes where they didn't stay in an institutional setting, they did better with those groups. But Stephen has something important to say. So I'm going to give the floor to Stephen.
Yeah, Stephen.
This may be complete rubbish, but I'd like at least some people who know about COVID to hear about it. The weight of a COVID virus is 10 to the minus 15 grams. Okay, and the weight of the piece of salt that we want to use for making clouds whiter is 10 to the minus 14 grams. In other words, it's 10 times heavier than the virus. And we know that salt is incredibly good at killing off bacteria. And I haven't been able to get a medic professional expert to say whether they do the same job for viruses. I think the reason that it's so good for all bacteria, I mean, preserving meat and all that kind of stuff, is because of osmosis. I think that you're drying out all the water from the bacteria. And I'm told that there isn't much water inside a virus. But I would dearly like to know what would happen if we could make a 10 times higher than the weight of the virus clunk on top of it. And to give you some numbers, if you wanted to give the air that people are breathing 1,000 fragments of salt in a cubic centimeter of air, which is what you would be getting if you were walking along the beach in rough weather. There's lots of spray. If you wanted to do that to the underground system in London, you want to give all the air in London 1,000 per cubic centimetre, you'd need 20 grams of salt, all right, which is a few packets of crisps. So it's because they're so small, and of course the virus is so small, that the salt will go a long way. We could quite reasonably have drones circling round the upwind side of a city, releasing salt particles, and we could put 1,000 per cubic centimetre into an entire city with much, much less salt than is used for stopping vehicles skidding when there's ice on the roads. So there's a question: what does salt do to viruses? Now, I tried to get medical advice on this, and I did find out that they do actually put salt into the nebulizer that they put into the airlines for people on ventilation systems. They put it in as a liquid, and the size is probably a bit bigger, but it is already being done for other reasons. But it is being used. I'd like to know from anybody who really understands viruses what the chances of this working are. I could do the engineering if you say that it's going to be worth doing.
What an original idea. Nobody else has come up with anything like that, Stephen. And I wonder, okay, Robert,
Yes, there's a difference between viruses and bacteria. Bacteria are larger organisms with many parts that reproduce themselves. Viruses are really just molecules. Unfortunately, the degree of salinity would have no adverse effect on the virus.
You're sure of that? I mean, I'd like to have that tested.
Yes, there's no way that you could get the salinity would have more adverse effect on the human host of the virus than it ever would have on the virus.
So I would back that up because there is no water inside a cellular membrane, that's associated with a virus. A virus infects a human cell to reproduce, cannot reproduce on its own.
Yes.
One place you might ask somebody and probably get an answer right away. I'm on Facebook and I belong to about 200 social groups. And there's one called the Society of Virologists or something like that. So if you're on Facebook, I would suggest that you search for that social group and post your question. I mean, they probably let you post a question right away. And I bet you get all kinds of answers to it. Let us know next time what you find out, or if you do find something out, Stephen, you can post it on the comments column of this, our own website for this show. Okay.
Okay.
Now I want to move on, and I don't know whom to call on because nobody's put your hand up. Although I see a lot of newcomers whose name I don't recognize. And I'm very willing and eager to hear from any of you. Newcomers get priority. So if you want to speak, would you mechanically put your hand up, or digitally or something? Put your digital hand up so that I can call on you. I think you do that by clicking on participants. Is that right? Is that how you put your hand up on this thing? Anybody? Who? All right. No, I don't see any hands. So you can just butt in. If you have something to say, here's your moment. Seize the opportunity. Okay.
Well,
Lynn Adamson.
okay.
Lynn. Hello. You got unmute.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Let me see. Okay. Hello. Nice to be with you. Just listening in. Interesting afternoon. I'm personally working on the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty campaign, which we signed up on. I don't know how many people know about this campaign, but it was formally launched on the 17th of September, so just a few days before our election, with the parliamentarians' website, which is fossilfuelfreefuture.org. And parliamentarians can sign on there that they agree with the points of the plan, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Plan. And the idea is to get this circulating around the world and get support from communities before the COP process starts in the beginning of November. And in July 15th, we had Toronto sign on, a Canadian city, to sign on in support of that. So City Council voted 22-2 for that, and Vancouver had previously voted for it. So cities cannot make the treaty happen, but they can add to the pressure for our government to do it. And the step number one in the treaty is to stop any further fossil fuel development. So no more approvals and no more subsidies. And the second part is planning the phase out of current reliance, because what we know is that we haven't reduced our fossil fuel emissions despite a lot of talk about working on climate, and we haven't stopped the development. Now, China has now said that they will not finance coal plants outside of their own borders. They had been financing up to 70% of all new coal plants outside their borders. So that is a big step. So there's steps that are happening. But if anyone's interested in working on that in your own community, for example, get in touch with me. Or the other thing to do, is to sign up on the fossil fuel. It goes, the website is fossilfueltreaty.org, and anybody can sign up, and any individual can sign up. The other one is for parliamentarians. So I think it's an exciting new initiative, and I will also add to that there is an initiative called Beyond Oil and Gas that Costa Rica and Denmark have signed up on, and that's a very simple pledge. It's related to this treaty. It's kind of the first step, to say no more of fossil fuel development, and they're trying to get other countries to sign on in advance of COP. So it's a very crucial few years for working on climate. So that's one thing that we're working on. And I don't know how many people on this call were part of the student climate strikes on Friday, but I was down there at Queen's Park, and it's very heartening to see the youth taking this up around the world and calling for the changes we need for a livable future. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. If anybody has questions, let me know.
let me question you more about this treaty. Now, I've only vaguely heard about it. Is it something where is it going to happen? It doesn't exist, of course. There's no such thing as this treaty, but you're hoping to create one, right?
That is
correct. How would that come about? Would it begin at the COP meeting in Glasgow, or how would you get the thing to be realized?
Yes, it has to have leadership from countries internationally. So that is where Costa Rica and Denmark are starting with the beyond oil and gas, because that is kind of the first step of a more comprehensive treaty. Yes, it's a concept rather than a treaty right now. So people cannot sign on, or countries cannot sign on, but you can sign on to support the initiative, and thousands of people have done so. There is also an academics and researchers letter with thousands of signatures on it supporting the need for this treaty. People may not realize that the Paris Accord does not mention the term fossil fuels. It talks about decreasing emissions and staying under a certain 1.5 degree rise if possible, but it does not say we have to cut our use of fossil fuels. And the fossil fuel companies are desperately trying to backpedal and keep from an end to their industry. And this is why a lot of the NGO groups, including Climate Action Network in Canada, are pushing for the just transition so that workers are not left behind in the transition. But the transition has to happen. And I don't know how many people would know as well that the International Energy Association in May, they've always been pro oil and gas and secure supply around the world has been their thing. They have said no new fossil fuel infrastructure if we want to reach net zero by 2050. There should be no new investment in fossil fuel. That is major. That is tectonic shift. But industry and government.
But what would the treaty, if there were such a thing, what would it say? What would it specifically call for?
Yeah, so there's 3 points to the treaty. The first one is an end to fossil fuel expansion, infrastructure expansion. So no new approvals, because that is done generally at the federal level, and it can be stopped at the federal level by just not even doing an EA and just not granting. There's apparently 20 projects on our own environment minister's desk for new things. And as recently as March, they were approving new exploration off of Newfoundland. So all that would stop. So that's the first thing. You stop expanding, number one. Number two, you develop a plan to phase off our dependence on fossil fuels, which basically means two main things. One, we stop using gas for transportation. We electrify all transportation, and we have fossil fuel free sources of electricity. And the other piece of it is home heating, which is on gas, has to stop. It has to be converted to electric, and that is heat pumps, which are very efficient. And so, in fact, it will not cause the electric grid not to be able to cope with the demand, with the electric cars and electric heated homes, because heat pumps are so much more efficient. So Efficiency Canada did a study about how we could do this in Canada, and they put that out in June. So we need to retrofit all the houses in the country, all the buildings, and that's a huge job creator. So the second part is having that plan to phase off dependence on fossil fuels, which is gas largely in our country right now. And then, which people know is methane and is terribly polluting. So we want to get off that. So then there's the third part is doing this in a just way with a just transition plan for workers and communities that are affected. So that's basically it. It's those 3 points. And you can see that on the treaty. There's 101 Nobel winners that have come out for it, the Dalai Lama and.
Now say again the website they should go to.
Yeah.
We want it to
So
be audible.
it's fossilfueltreaty.org. That is the starting point. Go there, and from there you can find the academics' letter, the Nobel laureates' letter, and the initiative around the parliamentarians. There would be a link to that, which is a separate website for parliamentarians to sign. And we already have some signatures, because our push during the election was for pledges from candidates that they would sign this treaty initiative once they were elected. And we have Elizabeth May, no surprise. We had Paul Manley, but he unfortunately did not win re-election. We have Nathaniel Erskine-Smith of the Liberals, and we have Peter Julian of the NDP. They have all signed, and Rosa Galvez, who's a senator. So those are the ones from Canada that have already signed. It's similar, I think this one is similar to the Parliamentarians for Nuclear Disarmament, the PNND. So it's that kind of initiative, so that they can individually sign onto it, even if their parties and their governments have not signed onto it yet. Mm-hmm. So that's what we'll be pushing forward with now.
Thank you. Okay,
right.
Stephen Salter, I think you have your hand up. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yes, I completely agree with all this, but there's another thing that not many people know, which you could bear on this, which is that the fossil fuels we know give nasty warming for hundreds of years, particularly carbon dioxide. Methane's a lot shorter. But in the short term, maybe only 2 years, they actually do some cooling, okay, because they're putting up aerosol, and they can put up quite a lot. You can actually see cooling in the wakes of ships in the sea. When we had to clean up gasoline for road vehicles, the oil companies put all the sulfur that they had to take out of the petrol into ship fuel. So if you're going to do this suddenly, you must also at the same time do some deliberate cooling as well. Okay, it's not the fossil fuels are working in two directions: one short term, one long term.
Mm-hmm. So that's why it would be a good time to start your cloud brightening operation.
Yeah, that's right. We should do it and do more initially, and then maybe ease off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Okay, I don't see any more hands, but we do certainly have some newcomers here who haven't spoken. And if
I've got to go to bed now.
Sorry, Stephen?
I have to go away now. So thank you.
Thank you for showing up. Good to see you again. Who else wants to speak, especially if you haven't spoken before? And here's Francois Stepman coming in, but I see some names that Wendy McKenzie, John German, Davidson Aconia, Francois Stepman. Those are the main. Amit, I don't know who you are, Amit, but welcome. So if any of you want to tell us who you are and what you're up to, this is a good time. Grab the mic. Just unmute yourself and speak. And then if all of you speak at one time, I'll have a problem. You guys are shy. I can't believe it, David.
Okay, Wendy spoke at the beginning, yes.
Yeah,
I'm from the UNA in Trinidad and Tobago, yeah.
Okay, tell us more. Go on, Wendy.
Tell you more. Okay. Well, I'm also a UNESCO teacher at my school. I'm a teacher as well. And we are working with Taking It Global. We did carry one student to COP25 in Spain. And we are not going this year to Scotland, but we are still working as a team. It's a number of schools from a number of countries. Maybe, I think it's over 35 countries. And we are working with the Decarbonize, Decolonize group. It's based in Canada. And we have to do a country study based on what decisions our government is taking to reduce because we are an oil country, right? So we do have some work to get done. We haven't started the project as yet. We are starting next week. The program for all schools will be launched on Wednesday.
For all schools, you say, the program for
Yes,
schools?
we are a part of a group. It's a UNESCO-based group, taking it global. Decarbonize is the project. It's called Decarbonize, Decolonize. And we have an online classroom. Students from, I think it's over 30 countries. There are online activities. And there is a team that will be going to Scotland this year. The last time we went to Spain for COP25, I carried one of my students to Spain for COP25. So we are a group of young people, and we are doing certain things to build awareness, given our limitations.
Okay. Well, thank you. Would anybody like to question Wendy about her work or comment on her work? Because I think we certainly are all solidly behind you, but maybe there are some details to be explained. All right, I guess we're not, but thank you, Wendy.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, stay with us now and let's talk to somebody. I'm surprised that Davidson hasn't spoken up yet. Davidson, how are you? Join us. I think you've been with us once or twice before, right?
Hello, Meta, and all my colleagues on the platform. Yes, I'm Davidson from Kenya in Africa. I hope my voice is audible enough.
It's fine. I wish you'd turn on your microphone, your camera, though. What's the matter with your camera?
No, it's actually dark here. I don't know whether you can be able to see me. It is night here in Kenya.
There you go. That's all right. I'm happy enough to see a flashlight on you. Just now we can see who we're dealing with. So,
yes.
Okay, Davidson, tell us more.
Yes. So I may not be able to speak much today because I have some malaria. I'm not feeling very well in my body.
Sorry.
I've just come from the dispensary. I've received an injection, so I'm just resting on my bed as I join the global town hall.
Well, what do they give people for malaria? You get an injection, and what do they shoot into you?
They use that's a hard question because I'm not a medical.
Okay. Maybe one of the physicians here can tell us. Robert Reed, do you know what they give people for malaria? He's just been sick, or he is sick.
I'm not sure of those details at this point. Haven't had to look at that for years.
Quinine? I can't say the word. Quinine.
Yeah, quinine.
Quinine.
Yeah. Quinine is prevention, yes.
Yeah, quinine has been in use previously, but they have developed new medicines. Now they use called what? Now we use
Is it a hydrochloroquine? Or that's a version of quinine?
Hydrochloroquine, yes.
Hydrochloroquine, right.
Yes, that is it. Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I notice apparently malaria is still really a big problem. I know one of the big campaigns recently, I don't remember which one, had HIV and malaria lumped together as if this, somehow, not that they were claiming they were causally related at all, but that they were sort of equivalent in urgency and in severity and how many grave impacts they're having on the planet and on the human population. That malaria is still sort of in the same category as a threat as HIV, which I don't know whether that's true or not, but that was the implication of what I inferred from their doing this. Anyway.
One of the chief projects of the Gates and now combined with Warren Buffett's money, their joint foundation, is HIV, malaria, and TB. All three are immense problems still, but that foundation is doing the right things about all three, particularly in Africa, and so it is working. One of the things for malaria actually is simply netting that you sleep under to keep away the mosquitoes.
I've always been impressed by the number of mosquitoes that could get at me in broad daylight. I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm sure it's true that netting is a big deal, but I come away with a lot of bites no matter what.
Fortunately, they aren't the ones that spread the malaria. But one problem with climate change is they could start coming here just like ticks with their Lyme disease have spread northwards through North America.
West Nile too, I think too. Pauline, you had your hand up. Yeah. Unmute.
There are 267 kinds of mosquitoes in Florida, where I live a lot of the time now. And I thought, well, maybe if you just don't go out, at night, but there are mosquitoes that are very active in the daytime, others only at night. There's no way to beat them except to put that kind of spray deep forest off or something. And that's almost as bad as the mosquito bites, except that you don't get encephalitis from or any of those mosquito-borne diseases, which we have in the United States now from time to time. Good luck.
Okay, indeed, good luck to Davidson. I see you now are back on your bicycle instead of with a flashlight on your face, but we know you're here. Thank you. Amit, would you say hello to us?
Hi, Meta. How are you? I hope you remember me.
Can you put your camera on? I'd love to see you.
It's 1 a.m. in the morning here in India, so
all right.
I apologize. I just got your email, just joined in. I hope you remember me. I was introduced by Paul Verbos to you.
Oh, well, yes, but we haven't met in person unless I see your face.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do that some. Okay, I just wanted to talk about. I'm in north part of India. I'm in a city called Chandigarh, which is the capital for Punjab and Haryana. I wanted to talk about the crops that they burn every twice a year, which adds up to a lot of pollution, especially in Delhi. So it travels around 250 kilometers. To Delhi, where the pollution is at the max, right? And all these, the subtle burning, the crops paddy burning, it's sending a lot of bad, it's very bad for the climate, and people have breathing issues. Indian government is trying to do a lot, but the farmers are kind of, the policies are not very good. The machines for really destroying that subtle is very expensive, around $15,000, and even if you're paying the farmers not to burn their crops or the paddy, during summers or any time of the year, the incentives are very less. So I do not think the government is taking enough initiative or have an aggressive policy, especially in North India, to stop all this. So I would appreciate.
What's the alternative? If they don't burn, what else could they be doing instead?
Well, there are machines that can do it by not polluting the environment. So, but those machines are very expensive, and I'm not sure the government can take that initiative and give it to every farmer. So it has to be more international, or somebody else have to step in to stop all this. Because it is really chaos in India, and the Indian population is so big, especially in the farming side, that whenever there's a problem with the government, the farmers protest, and millions of farmers come on the roadside and protest against the government. So I think the government cannot support it. You need an outside effort to take care of this.
You know, there's so many questions that arise in my mind, and I don't want to hijack this conversation and make it just a one-on-one, but I'll tell you what bothers me. Number one is I certainly am aware of the political implications of the farmers' revolt and the fact that this is probably maybe the only major movement that is standing up against the Modi government. And God knows somebody ought to stand up against the Modi government if you just pay attention to what all they're doing. So that's one thing. My heart is with the farmers. On the other hand, on a lot of other grounds, I have a real question about it. One is, I think in general, the technology of farming that they are used to is not environmentally, and it's not good for the climate, and it's not good for sequestering carbon. Moreover, there's even the question of whether or not people should be raising rice. I mean, obviously, we're not going to convert all Indians into barley or millet or a wheat consuming population, but the whole production of rice inevitably involves the use of water, standing water, which produces methane, which is a serious source of global warming. Therefore, if I've stopped eating rice pretty much, I eat barley, but I live in Canada and I don't have to worry about what the implications are in other parts of the world. I don't see there's any likelihood that you're going to be able to convert I presume, your rice paddies into barley fields. So this is just raising a whole bunch of questions that I think you probably don't have time to answer, but you can take a crack at it if you want.
Well, the problem is India lacks farming technology, especially the agro technology, right? And the Modi government, as you've said, it's not doing a very good job. He's more like a dictator than to solve the problems. He's doing changes inspired from especially US, but they aren't making a good change, especially to the climate. So farmers are poor. You don't even know the suicide rate that the farmers have in Punjab and Haryana because of the loans and because of the interest they're levied on, right? So I do not know how to change this. There are associations, there are NGOs who's trying to do that. And I don't feel that we have the infrastructure or the government is ready to provide that infrastructure or stop the deaths or to make a sea change. It has to be outside effort and help. And I do not know how to get that. But yes, if I were given a chance to do something for them, I would surely go out of the way to help them. But it cannot be solved without an outside help, where technology is cheap, where farmers can have more capital. They of course, they are doing rice because they survive on it. But until the environment changes, if the infrastructure changes, I do not know how farmers and climate change will be protected. So I think that's my input. So you need a very big pressure and outside, not only one country, but a lot of countries come out together and help India to get over that, because it is really bad here. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Well, that's a gloomy prognosis, because there are a lot of problems there, and some of them involving the politics in India, but others maybe with totally different orientation involving the climate and of the world. So I don't know.
More specific about the outside help needed. What would be needed ideally? What would he want?
So technology, funding. Do you know how much they pay to a farmer not to burn the paddy or the subtle? It's $50 an acre. That's peanuts, right? And we need outside help in technology, funding. I think that should be something to start with.
Has anybody proposed? I mean, this is just top of the head, completely blue sky thinking, not based on anything. But has anybody proposed, cutting the paddy or the rice stalks and so on, and making biochar from it, because that could enrich the soil? It wouldn't solve the problem of the methane production, though. So I don't know whether anybody has a technological answer, even quite apart from the funding, who's going to pay for it. I don't know whether there is an answer at the moment. I'd be very curious to know whether anybody has an improvement over the whole idea of raising rice, at least raising the rice the way it's been raised in India.
I think I did read something on that a couple of months ago. I've forgotten, but I can look that up and next session come back with.
Post it on the comments column so other people can see it.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Amit. Now let's
You're
see.
welcome.
I beg your pardon?
I said welcome.
Okay, fine. I see Alan Ware here. Welcome, Alan. It's always wonderful to see one of the great leaders of the world peace movement and disarmament movement. I want to, I'm sure I don't have to hesitate. I don't have to be cautious about giving you the floor. Tell us what's going on in the world of nuclear disarmament and climate change.
Oh, hello, Meta. Thanks so much for the introduction. Sorry I'm late and not able to stay for too long. I guess everybody knows today is the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. Perhaps you've already mentioned it.
No, actually, I'm glad you're mentioning it. Good for you.
Okay. So it's a Sunday, which means that the UN commemoration event for it isn't today. It's happening on Tuesday. The day was established by the United Nations General Assembly to highlight the importance of nuclear disarmament and the risks that nuclear weapons pose to the world, and also to call on governments, particularly the nuclear armed states and their allies like Canada, to join in negotiations for a phased process for the elimination of nuclear weapons. So there will be a number of leaders speaking about this at the UN on Tuesday. It's an all-day event. I think so far there is about 80 governments signed up. Most of them will be there, the president or the prime minister or the foreign minister or the defense minister. And then there's 2 representatives of civil society who have been selected by the president of the UN General Assembly to speak. And they are 2 young climate activists, which is very interesting because this is an event to talk about the elimination of nuclear weapons. But basically, the president of the UN General Assembly has seen the power of the young climate activists to raise the attention of climate change in the world and to push governments to move on this, and is basically saying, so what can we learn from you in the nuclear disarmament movement? We don't have the same sort of attention given to nuclear weapons. Both these issues, nuclear weapons and climate change, are existential threats to humanity. Both of them, those issues, destruction of the climate and the use of nuclear weapons, has transgenerational and transborder impact. It can't just be contained within states. Both require cooperation in a global community and developing of a common security approach, putting common security ahead of national defense. And so the UN sees all these links, and the Secretary General of the United Nations in his disarmament report a few years ago was making the links between disarmament, climate protection and sustainable development. But so far governments haven't sort of cottoned onto that. So I think the president of the UN General Assembly has brought in a couple of, young climate activists to speak and challenge the governments to take more action and stop standing behind, excuses that, we can't work on nuclear disarmament until the world's a safe place. You create a safer world by working for nuclear disarmament. And I think this will be the challenge of the young climate activists.
But Alan, excuse my cynicism, but I presume that the nuclear states will also be represented fully, and that the whole thing, therefore, from our point of view, will be a phony baloney kind of event, that they're going to say all kinds of nonsense, and then everybody will go home. Is there any reason to think anything serious and real could come out of this meeting?
Well, this is only one event in a whole range of things which are happening on the nuclear disarmament front now. And I think the importance of this event is to indicate, that the United Nations has a role to play. It brings governments together. That common security, has a role to play instead of relying on just military security. and that we can cooperate on these issues, nuclear disarmament and climate change. And in a sense, there's also direct links. You know, if the nuclear weapons budget, annual budget, is $100 billion per year, for stabilizing the climate, we need investments in renewable energies. Where could that money come from? Well, if we cut the nuclear weapons budget, we've got that money. So it's this messaging is what will take place, you know, in the high level event. You're quite right. You're not going to suddenly change the momentum and the direction of the governments, you know, the nuclear armed states. That takes a lot more work and it's ongoing. So the high level UN event is just a place where some of the ideas and issues can be put forward on the table, and then, you know, the real campaigning can continue. But hopefully more people can know what others are doing and join in the campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Could I speak to this? I'm sorry to speak so much, but I do have a lot of information on this and have done quite a bit of work. There is help on the way. The Rotary International current president, who's from India, Shekhar Mehta, as his theme is to promote peace in the world, but as part of that, to replace Rotary's International's now successful 50-year program of eliminating polio to eliminating nuclear weapons. And there is a plan actually to eliminate them by 2030. This is very ambitious, but it is possible. And it would be based on a now 4-year-old treaty called the TPNW, the Treaty for Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. 122 countries signed on to it 4 years ago. It became official international law January 2021, when 50 of those countries had verified it through their governments. And now the number of countries has reached 86, and not including the 9 nuclear weapons possessing countries, and not including the NATO countries as yet. But this treaty lays the groundwork, along with the 50-year-old Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is, I think you were referring to, is being examined over 2 weeks in the UN in January. But this treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, with its 86 signatories so far, is the basis, because if you read that treaty, it promotes an opportunity for other countries, including the NATO and the 9 countries, to join, and the terms under which they do it. And the idea is that it would lead the next AGM, annual meeting of Rotary International, is in Houston in June. And so the work is being done now within Rotary, that starting then, the 1.2 million Rotarians all around the world work toward their governments, if they haven't already, to sign that, go in on that treaty. And the aim is that if these 9 nuclear weapons countries go in, that they would have a conference of just those 9 and set a deadline for when they'd come back to a second meeting with their detailed plans for how they would get rid of all their nuclear weapons and the military industrial complexes that manufacture them. And they'd come back, and then at that second meeting, where they all have their detailed plans, they'd set another time deadline at which they'd come back, having all done that simultaneously and openly, with overseeing internationally composed verification commissions in every country, and which would be permanent, so that once the nuclear weapons and the ways to make them were gone, each country in the world would have a commission that would have complete knowledge of and control of every bit of nuclear material in that country country and make sure they never come back. And so with this laid in place, this long-term solution, it's hoped that those 9 nuclear weapons countries would come in and agree to do this. And this is a pathway, and it would be much easier to be done than climate change, because climate change requires people all over the world doing all kinds of things to reduce carbon dioxide and methane, whereas in this case, the most governments internationally, the government has a great more power than they do domestically. And so if those 9 leaders would agree to this, the destruction of the nuclear weapons would be easy, because in 1990, there
Robert,
were,
I want to give.
there were 44,000. Okay, I'll finish off. There were 44,000 nuclear weapons, 1990. Gorbachev on one side, Reagan and Bush Sr. on the other agreed to reduce to from 22,000 each to 7,000. In other words, the total number from 44,000 to the current 15,500. They did it. Engineering wise, mechanically, it's easy to be done. So the big things are the agreement and then the verification. Period.
Okay, we're going to move on.
Wings, there's optimism.
All right. Okay. I'm glad there's optimism, and I want to give the floor to Alan again, because I'm sure you may have things to say. And before you reply, I want to ask you also further about the linkage that you are making between the campaigns about climate change and nuclear weapons. I believe you hosted a webinar recently, which I had signed up to attend and then stood you up. So please integrate these 2 considerations in your reply, if you will.
Yeah, thanks, Meta. And just to let people know, I have put in the chat box a link to our announcement about the UN high-level meeting on the elimination of nuclear weapons.
The world's expert user of.
Hi, Erica.
Erica,
we can hear you.
Erica,
hi, I didn't know I forgot. I'm on a boat in the middle of the ocean.
Okay, but turn off your microphone. Alan's speaking, okay?
So, as I mentioned, I've put in the chat box just a link to the article that we just released today about the UN high-level meeting that's going to be on Tuesday. Also on the connections there that have been made between nuclear disarmament and climate action. Meta, you're correct. This hasn't just started now. We've been working on this for quite some time on developing these connections, including the connections between the movements. So we've held a number of events, including one that was earlier this month, September the 9th, at Central Hall, Westminster in London. And it was a hybrid event. So we had 60 people in Central Hall, Westminster, and another 200 around the world online. But we held it there because this was the venue where the very first session of the UN General Assembly was held in January 1946. And the very first resolution that was adopted by the UN General Assembly was one that was calling on the elimination of nuclear weapons and all other weapons of mass destruction, and was setting up a commission to explore how the UN could help facilitate that. Unfortunately, we then had the Cold War and it all fell apart, but that was the first resolution of the United Nations. So at that event, we brought in a mix of young climate activists, also experts in climate change and the climate issue, and experts on the nuclear weapon side to sort of cross-fertilize. And for some of them, it took a little bit to convince them to do it. They said, but these are 2 different issues. But once they got in there and realized there are so many connections, as I've mentioned and in the article, they saw that value. And it was after that we nominated these climate activists to the president of the UN General Assembly, who had spoken at our event, and the president of the UN General Assembly agreed this was a good thing to do to bring this into the UN General Assembly, those connections. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the connections are not just about that they both pose threats, to current and future generations, but they both require global cooperation to resolve. It's very difficult for like one country, like my country, New Zealand, is going for carbon neutral, by 2030. But if other countries aren't doing that, it puts my country at a competitive disadvantage, which is why we have to work on the global commitments on this. The same with nuclear weapons. Robert mentioned, this new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, but not one of the nuclear armed states and not one of the nuclear allied states support this. They all oppose it. And the reason for this is because they say it would put us at a security disadvantage because we would give up nuclear weapons while everyone else, many others still have them. So that's why there's not support for this new treaty, whereas a number of the nuclear armed states do support a nuclear weapons convention, which would be what Robert talked about a little bit later in his talk. The nuclear armed states themselves coming together and working on a phased process of eliminating all of the nuclear weapons under strict and effective international supervision, control, and management. So that's something which we're working on and trying to get moving on this.
Alan, before you sign off, I want to ask you, let's plan on setting up a talk show specifically about the conclusions that you came to from this conference regarding the connections between the climate change and nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
I'd love to have a specific talk show about that. So give some thought to finding who could be on it, 2 or 3 people, if possible.
Certainly. And I'll just add one more point, and that is the importance of law. Because law can help push, political commitment. We had the International Court of Justice case on the illegality of the threat or use of nuclear weapons in 1996, and under that, the International Court said the threat or use of nuclear weapons is generally illegal, and there's an obligation to work for their elimination. That's now stimulated a similar case to be proposed on climate change, and just yesterday, Vanuatu made the announcement. And you can see it in Reuters and various, that they are now launching an initiative at the UN General Assembly to take the issue of climate change to the International Court of Justice based on the success we had with the nuclear weapons case and using some of the same principles of law protecting current and future generations. So that's another really exciting connection is in the legal process that's applying to both climate change and nuclear weapons. And that was also elevated quite some by the UN Human Rights Committee in 2018, where it determined that the threat or use of nuclear weapons is a violation of the right to life, which is in the human rights law. So we're now challenging the nuclear weapon states in the human rights bodies. So there's some great developments in the legal field as well.
Yeah, I would hope that these young people who keep suing their governments and saying you haven't done enough to protect us, I don't know whether any of them are winning, but I'm always fascinated and heartened by the fact that they even try such a bold thing. Is anybody succeeding with that kind of strategy?
Yeah, actually, there's a whole database of climate litigation cases. I can put the link in the chat also. And of those climate litigation cases, over 60% of them are winning. And this is having a really good impact. And these climate litigation cases are actually are going to be part of the basis of going to the International Court of Justice. Although the International Court of Justice can take a broader body of law than domestic cases. It can go as we saw with the nuclear weapons case. So I'll put the database, the link to the database of climate change. And we've been doing a whole series of seminars on webinars on this with the young people who are taking this case in the International Court of Justice against climate change. We've been bringing them together with the lawyers who took the case in 96 against nuclear weapons in the court.
Good for you. You're terrific. Okay, Erica Simpson is a friend of yours. So before you go too far away, I want to give Erica a chance to chime in and say hi to Alan and whatever else you have on your mind. You say you're in the middle of the ocean someplace, Erica? Unmute yourself and give us a word or two.
Yeah, I'm actually on a boat in the middle of the ocean in Vancouver, and we just went by Nanu's Bay yesterday. So I was thinking about all the nuclear powered submarines underneath our boat. And also Nanu's is directly across, by Vancouver. And so this is, Vancouver's a nuclear weapon free zone. Right behind me, I don't know if you can see, that's the marina. So we're right in Vancouver, and this is our boat. And I'm sorry I was a bit noisy before. I was just so excited to see you, Meta. Congratulations on your birthday, Meta. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Well, now what's the situation about your brother's? Is this your brother's boat? And yeah, I hesitate to ask because I think I would have heard.
Well, he ran for the Green Party and he lost, but he put up a really good fight and he got a lot more green votes than most other ridings. the Green Party had a lot of internal disputes at the head office, and but not in Vancouver here and in his riding, which is one of the largest ridings in Canada. So it sprawls all the way up to Whistler, where we went up with the mountains there, and Squamish, and it goes all the way down to the richest part of Canada, which is right over here, West End, Vancouver. So the West Enders tended to go conservative. A lot of people went liberal, and then Avi Lewis, who's married to Naomi Klein and wrote that many famous books, he ran for the NDP. So it was a very, very tight race.
Who won?
The People's Party, the Liberal, the incumbent, won, but he lost a lot of votes as well. And my brother got a lot of votes, and he's encouraged. He's encouraged, and he'll probably run again. But the next election might not be for a few years. 3 or 4 years maximum. So we're going to keep pushing for the Green Party policies, which are non-nuclear and obviously non-nuclear weapons. And on Alan's point about the TPNW and the NWC, I just wanted to add, Alan, that here in Canada, the Canadian Pugwash Group is really going to be pushing for those two objectives. And you've seen some columns lately by our chair, Paul Meyer, with Cesar Jaramillo from Project Plowshares. But anyway, we're hopeful for the next generation. This is my little niece, age 9, and we're fighting to combat climate change and to get rid of nuclear weapons, the scourge of the earth. So thanks a lot, Meta. Thanks for letting me have that opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and I want to say hello to our youngest panel here. What's your niece's name?
Anya Simpson, and she's 9.
All right,
but
hi.
She was in all the marches, and she knows about politics. We train them young here in Canada.
Very good. Okay, well, you just hang in there and keep rooting for your dad. I guess it's your father. That's
my father.
Yeah, your brother. But her father, yeah. Okay, good. All right, thanks so much, Erica. And let's see. There's still some people here who've come, and I haven't called on because you haven't put your hand up. But Jean-Paul and John German and Paul Denmark and I don't know, Alexei Prokorenko and Heidi Schroeder. You're all people who haven't taken an opportunity to speak yet. So let's hear from one of you. Say hello. You have to unmute yourself and say hello, please. Hello? Come on, I'm sure one of you is not shy.
Well, that's true. It's John German in New York. I put people and projects together at the UN headquarters in New York. I've worked closely with Alan on nuclear disarmament as opportunities arise. And my internet connection is so bad that if I put my video on, I lose the whole thing. So apologies for that. I also do a newsletter about events of importance that people wouldn't otherwise know about. People who are interested in international things. And I will definitely put something up about these sessions, which I have not done yet. This is the first one I've actually attended, although I've been on your email list and have seen the marvelous work you're doing. But this is great, and I've already put things in the chat, private messages to various people about following up on specific things that they said during this session. So very fruitful. If you would like at some point to speak to the Rotary Club of New York, I would strongly recommend that. Because I think people should know what you're doing, and your presence is very refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you, John. And please feel free to make any comments you want on our website, because if you go to the website to savetheworld.ca, in a few days, I will put up the video for this whole 2-hour conversation. and you'll be able to watch it there. And below it, if you scroll down below any of the talk shows, there's a comments column. So I invite all of you to post anything that's on your mind there. You are very welcome to promote your project and the Rotary Club. Somebody's already made a mention of the Rotarians. So Robert Reed has already said that we can expect good things of, maybe somebody else too, of the Rotarians in the next year or so. So blessings to all good Rotarians and to John. So thank you. And who else? We have only 3 minutes left, theoretically, before I shut this whole thing down. So if you have
Could I make one final comment?
Okay, quickly.
Final one. That is on the chat about 4 or 5 up. You'll see I've put in a link that starts with IPPNW, that's International Physicians to Prevent Nuclear War. But if you take that down and then 2 entries below that in chat, this coming Thursday, September 30th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. If you click on that link I've given, starting with IPPNW, just get that down now. And if you click on it, you can do it right now. You can register for that, listen to it this coming Thursday at 11. And in the Rotary world, it's extremely important because it is the international president of Rotary International, speaking along with the president of the International Red Cross, plus the UN Undersecretary for Disarmament. Those 3 are going to be interviewed by the world president of International Physicians to Prevent Nuclear War. So those 4.
Robert, I have a better idea. Don't just, because if you put it on the chat, the only people who will see it are the people who are on this right now on this talk show. But you won't get any further attention. What you want to do is go to savetheworld.ca. That's our website. And then you go look for events, and then you post your event there, and that will reach a whole lot more people than you're going to reach this way. Okay. So I invite everybody, whenever you have an event coming up, please post it there so that we can expand the number of people who know about your events and also draw people to reading the events column on our website. That's what we want to do here. Okay, good. Now it says it is 3:59, so I don't have any more time, but if there's anybody with a burning, nobody's been red hot to talk so far today and with any sense of urgency. But if you haven't spoken and you have something you want to say, now's your chance. Anybody? Okay.
Just thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
This
Happy
is
birthday
always
once
fun.
again.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Well, it's already a month past, and I had a great birthday. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks, folks, and come back in a month. We always do this on the last Sunday of every month. And in the meantime, check the website because you never know what's going to happen there, including a lot of talk shows that are really interesting and important. Bless you all. Carry on. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.